And before I sentence you, I'd like to say a few words about your arrest record. What the hell?
Yo, the sign is real simple, B. It says wrap it up. Wrap that shit up, B.
I don't think that's a good idea.
Man, you want some too? You better wrap it up.
Welcome back to Thinking Critical. This is Wes, and we're essentially at the halfway point of the Ten of Swords event. We've had the two prelude issues in XMen and Excalibur. We had the X of Swords or Ten of Swords creation. We've had chapters 2 through 10 come on after that within the pages of the normal Dawn of X series. Ten of Swords Stasis comes out next week, which is essentially the start of the actual conflict itself. I said we need to do a midterm progress report. We're halfway through the event, and I think there's been more highs than lows. It hasn't been fantastic or anything, but it's been above average in my estimation. So we're going to kind of get into all the details. We'll talk about, generally speaking, some of the thoughts, and then some specifics that I really like, some specifics that I thought were really bad. And obviously, with me here today to talk about this is the Poobah Comics himself, El Percherino. Perch, what's up, buddy?
Hey, not too much. Thanks for having me here. And yeah, we're talking about the big, the fall event. You have to have one every quarter now for Marvel. So
apparently, I know your overall assessment is not quite as rosy as mine. I'm a little bit above average at a B. That's a solid grade. You came in a little under that, right?
Yeah, probably at a C. I think just kind of one grade level lower. I think this is. It depends on how you look at it. I think we're going to get into it as we talk through the series, but it kind of depends on how you look at this event. If you look at it as every issue and everything combined, I tend to go a little lower. If we're talking about just the high points, just the key issues, it probably is a B, I think. But it is, I don't know, this has been an interesting one to watch roll out.
It has definitely been formatted interesting. We're going to get into that. The first thing I do want to talk about specifically is, whoops, I'm at the end. Let's go to the beginning. Is the artwork, which I think has had far more highs than lows. Two issues specifically that I thought were amazing. I think probably the best illustrated comic in the entire Dawn of X so far was New Mutants 13 by Rod Reese. He's been on that title up until this point, and it's been very strong, but he kind of took it to another level in this one. And then, obviously, the two issues Victor Bogdanovich illustrated for Wolverine and X-Force that were essentially one story about Wolverine and Solomon getting the Muramasa blades.
Yep.
Just phenomenal artwork there. Like, those really stood out to me as high points as far as the artwork goes.
Yeah, I mean, in addition, of course, you have the first issue of Ten of Swords that was I think, was that RB Silva or was that yeah. I think those are the high points. Rod Rice is a really great artist. I think every time he's on New Mutants, it's those are the high point issues for sure. We haven't had nearly enough of him, but it did look really nice. The coloring and it's the whole package. It's a really well done issue. It reminds you of kind of old New Mutants as well, and kind of how it's illustrated and put together. But just looks great. And you're right, Bogdanovich is this is a talent Marvel's got to hang on to. He wasn't in their Stormbreaker program.
He's not a Stormbreaker? What?
He's not a Stormbreaker. He should be, though. I mean, this is kind of their next major talent right here. His stuff looks really solid. He draws an incredible Wolverine. It's dynamic on the page. It's again good use of color. The whole package is really good there. So I'm with you. By and large, the art has been pretty solid through this series.
Even Phil Noto, who I've been critical of within the pages of Cable, I thought maybe his work on interiors had fallen off. His issue of Cable that's in Ten of Swords was a noticeable improvement. It looked like he got some extra time because even that was pretty good. Now, there have been a couple of low points, one specifically, which I still don't understand it. Matteo Lolli has been on Marauders since day one. There's been a couple of fill-in artists, and for the most part, the art there has been solid to pretty damn good. But his issue of Marauders, I believe it's Marauders 13 in Ten of Swords, was rough.
Very rough. Yeah, I agree. I think it's hard to tell what's happening behind the scenes if they're being rushed to do this. And in many cases, you have the pencil and inker is the same person, and they're being asked to do more. But yeah, this was a pretty, not to be too negative about it, but the art has been declining kind of issue over issue with Marauders. I think it's getting more simplistic. It's not holding up in my view, and this issue was pretty rough in a lot of spots.
Yeah, well, I was not a big fan. Obviously, I dropped off Marauders for quite a while. I picked it back up moving into Ten of Swords because I'm covering the event. Yeah. But I was shocked when I saw. I was like, "Whoa, this is not what I remembered." Like, that's the worst Kitty Pryde I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah, it's. I mean, the positions, the characters kind of change appearance from panel to panel in some cases, and it's just very flat in areas. No pun intended. But it's just not the best. And unfortunately, coming off of some of these other comics, where I agree with you on Nato, I think Cable is working for him, just in how that's put together. I mean, there's a lot of really kind of top class art coming out. Excalibur, I think, had Silva on it. You have really strong art teams on here, and so it was definitely noticeable. I think that has been the low point of the art.
Absolutely. So one of the things that we've definitely gotten is specifically in the X-Men issues are large amounts of information dumps.
Yeah.
Basically, X-Men 12, which was the prelude issue, we got kind of the history of Amenth and Okkara.
Uh-huh.
No,
words that are
Arakko. Okkara was the first one. It was Arakko and Amenth, and the battle there is the original Horsemen in Genesis went through there and basically held the breach between our world and that world, and we're holding the demons at bay. That was a lot of information.
Yeah,
I thought it was good, but I think they would have done better to piece this type of stuff within the pages of X-Men moving up to this. And then in the recent issue, we basically got Apocalypse's origin retcon.
Yeah, we did, and I was not a fan of that. I know a lot of people were, and it's a lot of good back matter material. I agree. This is where the one and done kind of format they've been doing for X-Men, I think, has been hurting them. Like you, I think you take a couple pages of this and you feed it into every issue leading up to issue 13, I think we're on, of X-Men, and just kind of build to this rather than having these you hit this comic and then everything grinds to a halt and it's like, and now for some backstory, and then you get all this stuff. And
it would have been so easy too, because the summoner arrives, I believe, in issue 2.
Yeah.
And he's like, "Oh, you're the son of War, one of my 4 horsemen, one of my children." Those two, Apocalypse and the summoner, could have been catching up and filling in this backstory for a year now.
Absolutely. And I think it would have played better, because the summoner shows up and then gets kind of forgotten for a year. I mean, you're hanging out somewhere on Krakoa doing something for, a bunch of different things, including like the whole, zombie plant thing in Empire. And like, he's just kind of waiting his turn to tell his story. Beating it out would have been much better if they would have done it this way. And then, to the bit of a retcon on Apocalypse, I wasn't terribly happy with the way this all was portrayed. I think Apocalypse is a very interesting character in Marvel history. I don't think he needs a sympathetic backstory. This weakens the character. It doesn't add complexity to the character. It just weakens him, in my view. And,
well, specifically because he was so weak, he wasn't allowed to go through and defend Krakoa.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. His wife tells him, "You're not strong enough," and go to Earth and basically be hard on people and make them strong over there. And which is a weird plan too. If you're accepting all this, you're like, let's send the weakest person over to be our line of defense if we fall, is also a weird tactical move. But okay. No, I didn't care for that at all. And I think unfortunately it's, this whole bit with the mask and the elder demon that's in the mask and kind of consumes. It's like, you know where this is going. You know who's getting the mask, and Apocalypse going to have to fight her. I mean, you can tell how this is all, basically gearing up. And
we obviously did learn about Annihilation, the person in the gold mask. We're like, who is that? You find out Annihilation, the gold mask, is kind of its own character. The wearer gets it, and it kind of controls them. And if you aren't strong, like the guy here in the middle that's disintegrating, you fall to pieces, because you have to be a very strong character to hold it. it's pretty obvious that Genesis is going to be the character with Annihilation.
It is. And that's supposed to set us up for a big, gasp moment in this series coming up. And I think it's been telegraphed so much that I don't know. I hope that isn't planned and rolled out as like a big reveal, because it's not at this point.
So moving on to even though I've given it a B, I have to admit this: the actual progression of the story within the first 12 chapters is severely limited. Because in Ten of Swords creation, we get the prophecy from Saturnine, where she basically tells you exactly which mutants will be the 10 bearing swords, tells you what swords they are. It wasn't a very good riddle. It was too easy to solve. We know exactly which mutants were going to be there, and it's basically just, we see all of them. Okay.
Yeah.
Some of the stories have been interesting and they've been fun to read, but what we have now as far as the sword bearers of Krakoa are the exact same characters we already knew just because of the prophecy. So really the only progression outside of that is they added stakes because Rockslide died in Otherworld, and they found out if you die there, it corrupts Cerebro, and they can't bring back the original version of who you are. So dying in Otherworld is almost like a permanent death, even though there's resurrection on Krakoa. And then the other thing is you got the wild card. Probably the most interesting thing they did, which I thought was really, I didn't see this one coming, is they sent the Hellions over there to acquire a sword or two from the sword bearers of Arakko, steal them so that way they could never fight.
Right, and that turns into kind of a comedy adventure there. You know that the Hellions are not going to be successful in their mission based on things. But yeah, I mean, you had the first issue, and then you had the kind of stakes explained to you in X Factor. So if you're reading along at home, and this is where I was irritated at Marvel or kind of called them out a little bit, because they've been saying up till now, you don't have to read all the Dawn of X titles. You don't have to read. Just read the ones you want. You don't have to read them all. Yes, we're expanding the line massively, but that shouldn't bother you because you don't have to read everything. And then they roll out this series of Ten of Swords, and they stick chapters on everything that clearly identifies, hey, chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, which says you have to buy them all. But as you said, when you actually read it, you don't. If you picked up Creation and you picked up X Factor, you're probably good until Stasis. All you're missing is people going off and collecting the swords and doing stuff, and you get the feeling even the Hellions mission is going to get recapped at some point, probably during Stasis, that this is going on.
I imagine they're going to be captured by the sword bearers of Arakko and be held. That's going to be like the progression of that team in Stasis.
Yeah, and we know at least some people are going to die, because future solicitation for January says that Orphan Maker is being resurrected. So maybe they're going to resurrect people with different personalities because of the corruption and Cerebro. Who knows? But I mean, that's not going anywhere. It is a lot of padding. I mean, you're basically in for 9 issues or so of getting swords, and this is how they
quest for swords.
Yeah, and in a lot of cases, there's not really a quest. They just kind of have it, and they kind of show up and they talk some, and it is. The strong issue of the whole bit was Wolverine and X-Force, where you do get a really nice introduction of some new characters, and you get kind of it doesn't detour Wolverine. You still get some progression with the hand and all the rest. But by and large, they're all skippable if you just care about this event.
Also, that's the only comic where we see sword bearer of Arakko acquire their sword.
Right. Yeah. So I'm curious how this rolls out. In Stasis, is it going to be mainly an Arakko-focused issue where we get to meet all the sword bearers and see them getting their swords? Is that what's going on? I'm curious how this thing's going to get paced. The belief I had was after Stasis, then we're going to move on to the fights. But it's unclear to me if that's where we're going. Because if so, it's going to be, again, kind of a weirdly paced event. Of this thing was announced, then very, very slow gathering swords, and then suddenly fight begins, and we're going to get like a fight and issue. Is that where we're at? Or I don't know.
It's like a Netflix special.
It is. Yes, exactly. This feels like a Netflix special.
So moving on to some of the high points, we're going to go through what I consider the 3 high points. You can chime in or maybe name your high points. We'll go through what I think are the low points. These are kind of the three things that I thought were really good. This was severely telegraphed, but I liked it when the Horsemen turned on Apocalypse and basically almost killed him. You got Summer there stabbing in the back. It sets off this big battle in Otherworld. It's the only time I could stand Otherworld is when they're actually fighting. That was actually pretty interesting until Saturnine showed up and ruined it. The other thing that I thought was done really well, I don't like the way that they've done the stakes, and we're going to get into my thoughts on the corruption of Cerebro. But they really did build up stakes for Cypher. No one believes in him. He's essentially the little giants of the XMen. You know, his mom wrapped him in saran wrap and bubble wrap and everything because they don't think he can do it. You know, we get a little training montage, but I thought that was really strong character progression. Obviously sets him up as one of the main characters, probably to either die or be the hero. I imagine it's the latter. Yeah. And then I really like the introduction of Solemn. I didn't think I was going to like the character when I saw like the little card and the adamantium skin. I was like, that's stupid. Meet the character, loved it.
Yeah, I think these are three great high points. I do think the issue started off a lot better. The series started off a lot better than people thought with this battle. And yes, it was very telegraphed, but it still felt dangerous and it just felt like there was a threat there to uncover. I'm with you completely on Cypher. This is one of the first times we've seen Cypher written like his character was in Fall of the Mutants and down around that time period. It's a great time for X-Men books in general, where you know there's a lot of depth to this character, and he's typically treated as kind of a just a person who shows up to do some kind of computer thing at some point and then goes back into the background, and they've done a lot with Doug, and I think that's really, really great. I like Solemn. I love both these issues. I thought progressed him and Wolverine, frankly, who hasn't had a lot of progression in a while since he's been resurrected. I think these are the high points. I mean, there's arguable, some other stuff. I think Brian taking on a new role is noteworthy. I'm not sure it's good, but it's something. And then I think I don't know. These are definitely the high spots of this series. I agree with you. There's little moments that are here and there, but nothing major.
Yeah, I'm hoping Solomon actually he makes it out of this and maybe turns on the Sword Bearers of Arakko and joins up. It's obviously he wasn't really a part of the team because he's an interesting character, and I think he would provide a great foil for Wolverine moving forward.
Which I mean, spoilers in a sense. I mean, that is what they're saying is going to happen. So he was supposedly going to be in for the long haul. That could be a bait and switch kind of thing. But I agree they put too much energy into this character now to discard him in the next month. And so I do think he'll survive and continue, and potentially could be a pretty good villain. Wolverine needs some good villains like this.
Hopefully Ben Percy gets to keep working with the character and they don't let him slip off into maybe some of the other titles on Dawn of X with lesser writers, because he's doing a bang-up job so far.
Yeah. I forget, we know who his opponent is going to be, and I should have looked at that panel, but they're not. Wolverine is not fighting Solemn in the tournament, so they're at least in how it looks matched up.
Okay, well, that'll be exciting. I can't wait to see the matchups.
Yeah.
So moving on to the low points, and obviously I've already talked about the stakes that have been added in here. And I find this portion of the story to be completely ridiculous and unbelievable. That if something happens in Otherworld, it corrupts Cerebro and destroys all the backups of the personalities and history that Charles Xavier has downloaded. We've been told on 5 different occasions that Charles Xavier has uploaded old versions of himself into his own mind. So we know he can do that.
Yep.
Why doesn't he just take the Cerebro helmet off while they're over in Otherworld and wait for it to be over?
Yeah, I think there's a number of ways around it. This feels like the characters
unconnect yourself.
Yeah, it feels like characters being dumb. It doesn't make a lot of sense. I understand they want to throw some stakes in there, and they more importantly, I think they want to use this as a way to alter some characters, which is really where this is going. There will be some characters who will die, and those characters will be resurrected, and they will have different personalities and slightly different appearance and power sets, and it's a way for them to kind of change up how things are happening. I mean, this is where they wanted to do something different with Rock Slide. Now we've got a new Rock Slide, and that's how that's going to go. So that was the point of all this. But the way they got there was dumb. And I think the 5 in general, and even what they've been doing with X Factor of having this detective agency to kind of investigate, that the whole premise of all this stuff is just not a book that needs to happen overall, let alone this series. And it is, I don't know, this is becoming, I'm not sure who this is being written for. I know there's some Dawn of X fans who love getting into the details of this stuff, but it's not enjoyable.
No, people are like, you just don't understand what's happening. It's like, oh, I understand what's happening. I've had a computer virus before. Disconnect from the internet. It ain't that hard. Get out of here with that.
Yeah, I don't think it's because it's too complicated. If anything, the opposite. It's too stupid. I mean,
yeah, that's my take on that one.
Yeah.
So the second thing I absolutely loathe, and I probably dislike this even more, is every time this story goes to Otherworld.
Yeah.
I hate it. I hate the setting. I hate the characters over there. I hate Sir Jamie more than anything. And I just dislike everything going on in Otherworld. Satyrine, what is her power set? Why is she so powerful? Yet if she's so powerful, why was she duped by the Braddixes on her own prophecy that she already said that those two were going to enter the pit? And that, one of the swords that she said was her sword in her own goddamn castle. How can she be so stupid? And just everything about Otherworld sucks.
Thank you.
Fundamentally.
Absolutely. No, I mean, I don't. This feels like somebody who's watched too much Game of Thrones and done D&D fanfic going on. I mean, this is how Excalibur is largely read to me. I don't get into this at all. This is Teenie Howard's bit, but it's painful. I mean, medieval mutants is not enjoyable. Chris Claremont and Alan Davis used to be able to pull it off, but it's just terrible here. And yes, Saturnine, like what is going on? She did give the prophecy. She did name these people. She named her sword. She then creates that sword. It's beyond stupid. This whole thing is stupid, and I absolutely hate this whole bit. I hate Jamie and his stupid crown. I hate this dynamic that they've got going on. I hate the Renaissance Fair Hellions hanging out and joking about Sinister's cape. It's like everything that touches other worlds and this stuff just gets dumber, and I can't stand it.
Yeah, I love that issue of Hellions. I was like, man, this is borderline 5-star. Even though there hadn't been any action, I was like, this is an interesting premise. As soon as they got to Otherworld, I was like, this comic sucks.
Yeah, it drug it right down, and that and the just enough already with his capes. We get that he's super fabulous, but come on.
Yeah, and then the other thing that I think has been atrocious has been the white pages, overly wordy.
Yeah,
feel completely unimportant. If there's anything important being delivered in those white pages, I didn't receive it because after the first 2 issues, I'm not reading them anymore. They're so pretentious. They're off-putting. They're just enormous information dumps that's not exciting to read. Blech.
Yeah, and they're very inconsistently used. I mean, the one you have on the screen right now is in theory supposed to go through the other worlds, and there's a little hourglass like circle graph at the top where the blue kind of slowly ticks around, but then they either intentionally or unintentionally, who knows, they published them out of order, so it hops around. It doesn't make any sense, and the whole thing is I get it. You're doing something new, and a lot of Dawn of X fans push back saying, hey, this is just reading. What do you not like to read? But they're not helpful, and very rarely are these info dumps like House of X, Powers of 10. They actually mattered for the story that was being told. There's actually significant information being passed there. Now it just feels like they're throwing crap against the wall. It's not necessary at all to the story.
Yes, I could give 0 craps about the Regents of Sevalith.
We did get to learn all about Apocalypse's sadness sword though this way, so.
There have been, they have highlighted the blades and their origins and
the sadness sword. Yeah,
whatever. So I like the white pages when they're used appropriately. When they're used for crap like this or poetry and stuff like that, I tune right out. And I'm not reading another white page in this event because they've just been bad throughout. So. Those are basically what I consider the low points. Is there anything else that you would say is just a bottoming out of the event, or you're just like, come on?
Well, I think Marauders. I think that issue was just tone deaf on a lot of levels of how it handled Storm and the kind of the trip to go steal the sword and just this unnecessary conflict. You could
at the end it didn't matter because they gave her the sword anyway.
Exactly, and so why not just pick up the phone, call T'Challa, and just work it out, explain what's going on. Maybe you could use Wakanda's help, to guard the gate, or who knows? There's a lot of things you could have done, but instead we get this weird and dumb forced fight heist that made nobody look good. The Wakanda didn't look good, Storm didn't look good. The whole thing.
Who looked worse was Black Panther. This woman infiltrated your castle, talked back to your mother, didn't accept your gifts, didn't wait like she was told to, lied to your sister, broke into your temple, beat up all your guards, then beat up your sister, maybe killed her with her electricity powers, and then you let her leave with this important sword that nobody in the world but you can touch.
Yeah, exactly. That also we just learned about.
Simping ain't easy, Perch.
Yeah. It was a dumb issue. I think that was the issue probably that did, character damage to everybody involved. The rest of these have their problems like we talked about, but that issue actually made everybody worse. And what was frustrating about that was the gushing online about how this is the best Storm story ever written.
Yeah.
And it's like, come on, none of you guys are reading these comics.
I got a lot of negative feedback for that review, but I stand by my 1.5 star rating on that one. That was a bad comic.
It was absolutely terrible.
And it was easily the worst illustrated Marauders comic I've seen too.
Yes.
So that'll basically kind of wrap it up. We've kind of went through the information dumps. Generally speaking about the art, it's been very good. The progression has been not a lot. There's some key elements in there, but it's basically just the people that we knew would have swords now. I think there's been more highs and lows as far as moments. I think there's been some cool stuff in here, but there's definitely been some lows. I'm going to stick with, I'm going to bring it down to a B-. It's still above average, but there should have been more progression.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think that the good news coming out of all this is simply this. It is if you were interested in the event, if you really wanted to know what was going to happen with Ten of Swords and you want to make sure you're in on every event, then good news, you don't need to buy the regular titles. You can basically go out the gate with Creation. You probably hop back in with Stasis, and you're gonna not miss a whole lot. You'll be able to follow along. So this, in theory, series can be cheaper than you thought. So yay!
Absolutely,
yeah.
You didn't need half of it.
That's right. That's right.
So. All right, Perch. Well, I definitely want to say thank you very much. Is there anything else that you wanted to say about Ten of Swords before we wrap this up?
No, I just thanks for having me on as always. Always fun talking with you, and let's check back in here around Destruction time, I guess. So
absolutely. And next week, let's do something like this, but for Batman 3 Jokers.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That'll be fun.
Yep. So obviously, if you haven't subscribed to Perch's channel, there is a link in the video description. There's also going to be an icon on the channel right about now it says Comics by Perch. You can select that and go subscribe to his channel that way. Thank you all for joining us today for this Ten of Swords midterm progress report. B-. I adjusted my grade, but hopefully it picks up here in the future.
There you go. Thanks, everybody.